Tom, I think you need to switch off the slide. Great. Well, welcome everyone to the second installment of Dark Archives, virtual this time, and what an exciting experience it all is. First of all, many thanks to both Medieval and Torch and the Oxford Medieval, and especially to our trumpeter, Henrika Lanneman, who has been not just the trumpeter, but the rock on which all this has been built, really. She's been a great source of help. Henrika's involvement with music isn't going to stop either. There'll be a Compline later on this evening, so I hope everyone can attend that. It's actually going to be a socially distanced Compline, roughly a radius of 1,500 miles, I think. Like the trumpet, it's also part of the tradition of these conferences. Thanks too to our crack team of moderators and chairs. We're really grateful for the help you're providing us here. And also to my co-organizers, Julie Dresrina, who's coped marvelously with juggling childcare and the conference, and above all, Stephen Pink, who has done really the lion's share of all the work. And none of this would have happened without his dedication and technical ingenuity. And finally, of course, to our first speaker, Father Columba Stewart, who is, as everyone will know, Executive Director of HMML. And we're waiting, Father Columba, for your book on Christian asceticism and monasticism. Do you know when it's going to be finished?
That's an excellent question. I can see the finish line, but I'm not going to make any promises. I've learned not to be rash about that. One advantage to COVID is I'm not traveling. And so that does give me more time to keep at it. But it's going to be more of a study of the origins of Christian monasticism. So going into the pre-Christian background as well as the early Christian development, with a strong emphasis on Syriac culture of Mesopotamia. I'm trying to resist the myth of Egyptian monasticism, which then becomes dominant. So anyway, stay tuned.
Great, that's fantastic. We've had a series of questions actually via our various social media forums. Anastasia Ropa asked, how do you choose where to go and what to digitize? And do the holding institutions invite you, or does HMML address those institutions themselves? Or I mean, how do you make the decisions of what you're going to spend your time and money on?
Well, there are some cases where we know that there are manuscripts in a particular location, monastery, family library, whatever it is. And then we think about ways we can establish contact. When we're working outside of a European context, we need to have some kind of influencer within the community, some kind of bridge to help us make contact, just to lessen the cultural difference and the fact that an American is coming to look at their manuscripts, because we often find the assumption is if an American's interested, they know a way to monetize it. And so they're after some kind of commercial advantage. And all of us in this conference know that the only way to make money off a manuscript is to sell it. That short of that, there is in fact no way to have a commercial enterprise using manuscripts. So that happens in the case where we know something is there that we want. In other cases, we have people approach us, and it often is that intermediary figure who says, I happen to be friends with, the Patriarch of X, or a member of this historic Muslim family in Jerusalem, or whatever else. Is this something that would be of interest to you? And we don't always say yes, because in some cases, the material might be essentially modern ephemera, or it might be recent archives, which are not as directly of interest to us. But in other cases, if it seems to be a significant collection, so more than just a handful of manuscripts, say, in an area where we have worked or hope to work so that we can establish this breadth and depth of digitization of a particular manuscript culture, and particularly if there's some reason why it might be at risk, then we are certainly interested. And then we do the follow-up, which involves personal contact. We do have people who work as field directors for our project. We have somebody in Beirut, somebody in Jerusalem, somebody in Italy who works with our projects in West Africa, somebody in India, actually a couple of people in India. And so they might make an initial assessment. And then it's up to me or one of our other staff to establish then a more formal relationship with those places.
Do you have any cultural problems with training, given that it's so widespread where you're working?
That's where the importance of the local field director comes in. So the guy in Beirut can do French and Arabic, so he's been able to do much of the Middle East. He's been able to do the training in West Africa because Mali is a Francophone country. Working in places like Karachi, where we have a new project, English is actually very good in Pakistan, at least among the people working in these kinds of libraries. We find the same in India. So it all depends on the particular location, and then finding somebody who can be that translator or cultural bridge where necessary.
Are there any different notions of sacrality with the text you're dealing with?
Indeed, there can be. It's very interesting in this sort of cross-cultural work that we've done. Certain cultures seem to have more of a kind of, what I might say from a Catholic background, a kind of sacramental view of the manuscript as a holy object. And of course, this was part of Western culture until fairly recently, as we see from, the early Latin manuscripts and the British Isles, for example. So countries like Armenia and Ethiopia still have a reverence for particular manuscripts as being not only repositories of sacred texts, but also the object itself because of its own particular history or associations having power. For example, there's a small gospel book, very small manuscript in Armenia, now kept in the National Manuscript Library, the Matanadaran, because all of the manuscripts were taken from churches and monasteries in the Soviet period. And once a year, it comes back to the church from which it came on the outskirts of Yerevan, and people are mobbing it. They want to touch it. They want to touch a handkerchief to it. They send television cameras. I was there for this once. It's astonishing. And the manuscript itself is very unimpressive. It looks like so many other small Armenian gospel books, but given its particular association with that place, and I'm sure there were miracles or some other reason why it acquired that power, it's a big deal. And I can't remember anything like it except for the Easter fire at the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, where you similarly have mobs crowding in to have access to the flame. The other place where we found this is in Ethiopia. Things like the famous Ava Garima Gospels, which are regarded as holy objects. And so when you're dealing with situations like that, you obviously need to navigate the desire of scholars to have access, and then of course the technical requirements of digitization and the sensitivities of the guardians. And this is why the policy that we've used consistently of having members of those communities handle and digitize their own manuscripts is so important. So it's their hands on their cultural heritage. And we're there providing the training, the equipment, the technical support, but we're not actually presuming to do it ourselves. And you can see 6 reasons why that's the right thing to do, ranging from economic to skill building, but also a sensitivity to that particular aspect of culture.
Yeah, Colleen Goose praised your struggles actually on a tweet in saving Christian and Islamic manuscripts, or at least taking pictures of them. How much is the Benedictine heritage of the institution? How does that, is that an advantage or a disadvantage in these circumstances?
You know, I had it in my notes and I didn't end up putting it into the keynote because I thought it might come up. Obviously, dealing with Christians, it's a plus because monk is a familiar category across all of the Orthodox churches, for example. And so although I'm an American and although I don't have a big long beard, the fact that I show up in a monastic habit signifies. And it's very interesting how far the Benedictine brand has reached, even among these sort of Oriental Orthodox churches, quite remote from Western Europe. There's still this idea that Benedictines are about copying and saving manuscripts, which is, you know, I think very interesting and has been helpful to us. I wasn't sure how this was going to work when we began our work with Muslim institutions and communities to work with Islamic manuscript culture. And I found that it actually played quite well because first of all, it signifies not-for-profit. Mm-hmm. So if it's an organization that's founded by a monastery, led by a Benedictine monk today, that puts it in a particular category, which is helpful. And also, when you're dealing with people who are guardians of these sorts of collections, these are highly learned people. They're deeply steeped in their own culture. They know their texts, and they have a kind of breadth of respect for people whom they know have a similar background, even if it's in a different tradition. And so I think that's actually been helpful to us. And in some cases, for example, in Jerusalem, in East Jerusalem, the Catholic connection has been helpful because the Catholic Church has been seen as very supportive of Palestinian Christians and others. And so that was a help there as well.
Given the sheer number of Arabic manuscripts that you could actually eventually digitize, do you think that will really change the nature of the collection eventually?
Well, in terms of simple number of objects, the Arabic material will outnumber other things. Remembering, however, that most of these manuscripts from Timbuktu are quite brief. They're either fragments or they're letters or documents of one kind or another. So it sort of skews the numbers. But I think that's a very interesting question for the future. Given the amount of digitization that has happened in what you might call the kind of mainstream classical Islamic world, I mean, we're not going to be doing stuff in the Persian Gulf or Saudi Arabia or other places. They have resources, they're doing it themselves. I think our particular niche with Arabic and Islamic manuscripts is these other cultures, which are well worth studying and quite distinctive and have not received the same amount of attention. So West African is a good example, the work in Mali. Ethiopia is another good example. Beginning to partner with communities in northern India and Pakistan and this kind of Persian Urdu tradition, where again, they don't have the same resources, but it establishes a very interesting bridge then back to Iran. So I think that's where our value may show itself and where we can make the greatest impact.
Do you think that there'll be a place for Christian Arabic in this as well? Or,
oh, absolutely. We've digitized thousands of Christian Arabic manuscripts, and they're steadily coming online in HMML. The first Arabic manuscripts we digitized were in fact Christian Arabic, because so many of these communities, particularly the Antiochian Orthodox and the Greek Catholics or Melkites, Arabic has been their liturgical language really since the 17th century, whereas other churches have kept Syriac, Armenian, whatever, as their liturgical language to the present day. So this is a very, very interesting field because, of course, it has important early translations of Greek texts, in some cases Syriac texts, and a very interesting modern literature of translations of European theological and devotional works into Arabic, which then gain their own life and currency within those traditions. So Christian Arabic, like West African Islam, is a great example of a very rich tradition which historically has been quite underrepresented in scholarly discourse. And this is changing in both cases. but we're going to be providing, I think, a lot of material for people interested in that part of the Christian world.
Yeah, no, I mean it's so really, really important. And Sarah Ellis Nielsen noted the importance of the trade routes and communication routes in your paper, and in some ways, one question which I might bring up is that you made reference to the Sinaiticus and that which was actually produce of trade, we might say, and its dismemberment. But whether Greek manuscripts, you're finding any Greek manuscripts, or whether Greek manuscripts really are now limited to Western Europe?
There are some Greek manuscripts in the Middle East for obvious reasons, because you've got traditions which were Byzantinized in the medieval period. Originally were not, but then became such, like the Antiochian Orthodox, and then their offshoot, the Greek Catholics. Apart from that, we're really not seeing many. The Syriac Orthodox, occasionally you'll get a little bit of Greek, because there is a memory that their foundational texts were actually Greek theological works, which were then translated into Syriac out of those disputes in the 5th century. One of our lacunae in our work has been sort of classical Byzantine tradition manuscripts. And essentially the reason for that is they're under the Greek Orthodox Church. They are working on them as they are at Sinai and in Greece itself. They have resources, and this is actually one instance where being a Roman Catholic Benedictine is not necessarily helpful, because there are vivid memories of earlier unfortunate encounters between our traditions. So I have very good personal relationships with a number of people. I mentioned Father Justin in my talk, who's a wonderful person. My own supervisor at Oxford, Metropolitan Callistus Ware, very good friend, etc. But we have not been able to establish an actual digitization partnership with a Greek Orthodox community. And I think they're able to take care of their own things. I just hope they get online.
Mm. Yes. The other question really is the great possibilities of technology, which Sarah also brings up. Both the question, what we can do with digitized manuscripts, which perhaps we'll come on to, but also the amount of money you need basically to produce anything digital, and also to treat it. And so there have been a few questions of, well, where is the money coming from, and how do you get it?
So this is obviously a large part of what I think about and do. So we've been around since 1965, so we have the advantage of a fairly established track record. We do have an endowment which funds, I don't know, 25% of our work. So if all else fails, at least we can keep the data safe and accessible. But like most American not-for-profits, we have to be very active in fundraising. Obviously, the work we do is a bit esoteric in terms of general public. So we really do depend on foundations and federal agencies that are tuned in to what we're up to. Arcadia in London, our biggest single funder, National Endowment for the Humanities, coming in second, series of grants which have enabled us to do this. And then we have a loyal group of individuals who've supported us for years. And from all of those sources, we put together our budget. So we make it work. We have fundraisers, we have people who network for us, but that is obviously a major part of what we do. But one advantage to being an organization of this longevity and to having some portion of it in endowment is we are sustainable. And all of you know that so many scholarly projects, and we can all think of digital projects, depend on a particular grant, or they depend on a particular PI, professor, who then retires, moves to another institution, develops another interest, and it becomes a kind of a zombie project, or even simply dies. And so we tried to create a kind of institutional infrastructure that will enable our things to remain safe and available.
So speaking of the institution, HMML itself, Anastasia Ropa had another question, and she's going to ask it herself, I think. So she'll switch her sound on now.
Okay, thank you very much. So I had this question. I looked at the website of the museum, and I found that there is a school with like tutorials for these three scripts, Latin, Syriac, and Arabic. And I was wondering why is the choice of this, and are you going to add any more to this?
Yes,
I was particularly interested because I've seen there are quite a few manuscripts with Cyrillic script you have, and I was interested in this.
Okay, good question. We do plan to add more. We actually have some Armenian ones that are fairly advanced in preparation, but we just haven't been able to come back and give the attention to prepping those lessons for school. Cyrillic, we are adding quite a bit of material from Western Ukraine, and that is a growing, very active project. And I would be very interested in finding somebody who would be a good content creator for that particular manuscript tradition. So if you have suggestions, I'd be happy to get them from you. So we would like to expand it to cover all the scripts we work in. It's just a matter of time and resources.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a problem because I also started working on script. I didn't originally have education on this, but I have been looking for like further scholarly materials, and it's very hard to find anything. For me, it's part of my living tradition because I'm Orthodox Christian, so I can read it certainly, but I haven't found any very much by way of like scholarly studies on this.
Okay. All right, I will make a note of that. I don't know enough about that tradition myself to be able to comment, but it does touch on I see there's a question in the chat about all these different manuscript traditions, which are in a way lacking a lot of the scholarly resources and infrastructure that we rely on. So paleography is a good example. How does one have an introduction to paleography from some traditions which haven't been studied in quite the same depth as Latin or Greek, or have been studied, but have been studied by people who have not communicated their work in the ways that at least people in the West are used to finding them. And then this touches also on the question of manuscript description. I see the question from Teresa Weber here. The fact is that there is very poor infrastructure for traditions like Syriac, Christian Arabic, and so on. The standard resource for Syriac manuscripts was published in the 1920s, and it has only some information in it about manuscripts from the Middle East. Most of the work for that, this is Anton Baumstark's Geschichte of Syriac literature, most of that was based on what was in the British Library, the Bibliothèque Nationale, the Staatsbibliothek, and so on. And so it's a very partial view. And then the classic work on Christian Arabic literature, similarly, largely based on manuscripts in places like the Vatican, and has some contact with Middle Eastern collections, but not extensively, and is in great need of updating. So a big part of our effort recently with the new National Endowment for the Humanities grant is actually creating that kind of infrastructure by establishing sort of librarian level authoritative forms of names, titles, and so on, so that we can give accurate descriptions of these texts and then share all of that, of course, with others working in these traditions to kind of get them up to the level of sort of description consistency that you find for Latin and Greek, and one might also say classical Islamic text.
Thank you very much. And well, I think I would email you because I would like to be involved for the Cyrillic part. I have worked
Sure.
with earlier manuscripts, medieval ones, not so much with 16th century. I've seen that the manuscripts from Lvov library, they were mostly 16th century.
Oh, many of them are later. Yeah.
Yeah, 16th, 17th. But I would like to be involved in some way. And they have also hosted like Cyrillic calligraphy workshops. So I don't have yet this kind of a deep background as you say in Latin paleography, but I would be interested to be involved in it.
So stay tuned on the Cyrillic front. We do have manuscripts coming from Cetinje Monastery, Montenegro. And that's a very interesting, solidly medieval collection. So there will be more.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Sarah, I think is going to ask her question now.
Yes, it's in part already been introduced and answered by Columba, but I was interested in particular in the challenges that you faced or you are facing in creating an authority file for texts and manuscript traditions for which there isn't already a more or less established authority file. Is it your experience that you're pushing at an open door in collaborating with librarians and scholars elsewhere, or is there resistance to adopting a more sort of universal standard in the face of what might be local ways of doing things?
That's an interesting question. So from the perspective of, say, Library of Congress and, VIAF and these sorts of things, they're very open because Library of Congress, for example, doesn't have the resources to do a lot of this itself. And the other issue with Library of Congress authorities is they don't accept native script. And so we're able to provide authorities in both native script and transliteration, which is a boon. And we're contributing our authorities to the Library of Congress. So we will be adding them there. We will be adding them to VIAF as well. Now, one of the interesting things, not so much the names, but describing manuscripts, of course, does differ culturally. And this is fascinating, particularly, for example, working with the West African material. We have certain Western categories of, say, genre or classifications of texts that they find puzzling, even bizarre. And similarly, they have ways of describing things that differ from what we do, but are really, really interesting. So the task in working with scholars from some of these traditions is to crosswalk that in a way that we can create descriptions which are findable according to kind of standard scholarly conventions, which, for better or for worse, have been largely shaped by Western librarians and scholars, while also capturing some of those other ways of describing the material. And so for our West African project, for example, we do have cataloging the Timbuktu manuscripts, both a West African native, he's from Burkina Faso, but knows the Mali tradition quite well, Ali Diakite, working with Paul Naylor, who is English, but has worked extensively with manuscripts from Djenné and other parts of West Africa. And they are on Skype 8 hours a day, cataloging manuscripts as if they were physically side by side, having precisely these kinds of discussions about how you mediate between those ways of looking at something. And I'm quite excited about the potential for what that's going to lead to.
Thank you. That's absolutely fascinating. It reminds me of talks I've had with Imre Galambos, who works on the is taking a codicological approach to some of the manuscripts from Dunhuang, and what's emerging are quite surprising things about that hadn't been acknowledged. That, for example, there are books there which are in the codex form as opposed to the form of the book form that we're more used to from East Asia, and so collaborative approaches and comparative approaches to the physical structure of manuscripts, as well as their contents, is really it really has very exciting potential to it. But it is, as you say, it's that ability to converse with somebody and to discover what it is you don't, where you're talking at cross purposes, and finding out what those cross purposes are, that maybe offers some of the most exciting potential. So anyway, thank you very much.
Good point. And it also does touch on something else involved. The difference from moving from black and white microfilm to color digital, of course, is that the microfilm days, what were people interested in? They were interested in texts. And a black and white photograph of a binding isn't terribly helpful, particularly if it's a dark binding. And so it was all about getting access to the words on the page, producing editions, and so on. And today, of course, we have a much more kind of 360-degree approach to manuscripts. So the object itself, its physical characteristics, the clues, not only from binding, but also from end leaves of fabrics used in Middle Eastern manuscripts as paste downs, the silk, the woven silk used to cover illuminations in manuscripts from Syriac Christianity, for example. All of these things are now considered to be vital clues. And the color digital imaging, although it's not three-dimensional, can certainly capture a lot more of that data than was possible in the black and white days.
Thank you.
There is, those who are at the last year's Dark Archive will remember the presentation on the photographing of seals, 3D picturing of seals. I don't know whether that's been used at all in say photographing bindings or for these veils or other sort of pop out aspects of the manuscripts by HMML.
We have not. I mean, our actual digitization process is fairly low tech, simply because given some of the places where we work, it needs to be robust and simple. But I think there are great projects. So, you know, that we've talked about in my talk, at least, the multispectral imaging of palimpsests, the potential for virtual 3D reconstruction of dispersed and fragmented manuscripts. This is all really exciting. Now, moving from intensive work focused on a single manuscript during even a single leaf to large-scale mass 3D visualization of manuscripts, I'm sure that will happen at some point, but we're not anywhere near that. And at least at this time, this is not what we're focused on.
Great. Can we bring in Mike Toth here to talk a little bit about the palimpsest and digital imaging? Good day.
Hi, Mike.
Hey, Columba. Good to see you. Well, enjoyed your discussion and the comments on our imaging on Frag 32 there. And the one point I wanted to add, we all focus on the technology, and I know there've been a number of questions on that, and the 100 meg camera and narrowband lights and high-powered X-ray synchrotron. But to me, the tremendous advance in what HMML did and what we all did as a team was getting the data, very complex data, online for open access within 3 months after we conducted imaging in February of this year. We finished in February of this year at the Stanford Synchrotron Light Source and Stanford Synchrotron Radiation Light Source. Sorry about that. HMML, working with SIMS, with the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies at University of Pennsylvania, working with Doug Emery, with the team there, the team at HMML, with your IT and scholars and all those, to host the image data and the metadata for free access within 3 months, including all the multispectral data we had from before, was quite an accomplishment. And I think we tend to underrepresent that. We tend to focus on the blinky lights, the color X-rays. And it really comes down to not just that technology, but the people, the outstanding people at HMML, outstanding people at Penn, those at SLAC, Uwe Bergman and the physicists there, and the work processes. The workflow by which we can efficiently get, whether it's multispectral data, large multispectral data, as I said, 100 megapixels, 25 images in a stack, or the XRF data from all the different elements, the copper, the zinc, the workflow by getting those into good standard TIFF files, and then online, simple flat files right now. Lisa, tomorrow, I think we'll speak about, IIIF compliant, we can go that, future, but you all that out there. It's in a repository. It can be copied by anyone, used by anyone. And to me, that was the great accomplishment and the great joy of working with HMML and with my friends at Penn in making all these available.
Great. It's a fun project.
It is. Yes, you're right in the present tense.
It's not over. We still have to do a lot of work on those scans.
Yeah, I'm just putting the link here in the chat to the HMML FRAG 32. Yeah, it's in the chat.
So
this
is also an interesting example of what partnerships can do, because we put some of the images in the HMML reading room, but it's not really set up for this kind of stuff. And so that's why partnering with Penn, and we love working with Penn because everything is straightforward and professional, and it's just a great partnership for us. Then you can have sort of complementary things. So we can have some representation of it in our system, which has certain limitations because it's not designed to be a data repository in the way that OPIN is. And then we can have this kind of conversation going between the cataloging work that we'll be doing, and then, as you say, Mike, the full data set available on OPIN. So it's a great partnership. I like your badge collection, Mike, behind you.
Those are the things I'm not attending now. You were talking about Father Justin, and for a while there, I fear I was approaching him in beard growth. Stuck at home here.
Would it be possible to use the images you're taking of say manuscripts in Syria and process them to look for underlying text, so discovering palimpsests if it's possible?
Yes, you could probably certainly work with the images. I mean, to be honest, we have not come across any. Sinai is unique because it was itself a kind of palimpsest culture with these different communities of monks from different traditions there for certain periods of time, along with the Greek monks. And so the actual occurrence of palimpsests in our experience has been quite limited. Mike knows we have another sort of modern manuscript from Malta, which was a musical manuscript that is a palimpsest. And it's, an earlier music covered over by later music, and that might be of interest to musicologists. But I mean, to be honest, we really haven't come across examples. But certainly, presumably, there would be ways to take the full resolution images that we've captured and then put them through some kind of process which could look for them. If you had reason to suspect that a particular place, or if someone saw something on an image in HMML reading room that made them wonder, access to the full image, the full resolution image might yield up something. And we'd certainly be very open to that.
If I could add, this is the approach I think for anyone to take, is first the Mark I human eyeball looking at it, as you did when you passed by FRAG 32 while it was on exhibit. Hey, there's something there. Then very good quality digital images with whatever the best capability you have. More and more it's becoming mobile device, but whatever you can do, put it out there for others to see. Based on that, you may see clues. It could be just scribal lines or pricking marks or whatever, and I'm not a codicologist. Then you can take the next step, which would be further processing of those digital images, and then perhaps capture as you move up your pyramid here, if you will. Then you use more advanced technology. Did with 32. Okay, let's try multispectral imaging. We use the standard system we have with a 100 megapixel camera and 16 wavelengths, and then filters for the fluorescence. Then finally, oh, wait a minute, we've got this text here. Now it's worth taking it to a multi-billion-dollar synchrotron with competitive proposals for the time we needed, and so you work up from looking at it, digitizing it, then maybe multispectral, and then if you really need to, the XRF.
And that takes us back to funding again, I suppose.
Well, I should add that as long as the data are freely available, are made freely available, you have to compete with other scientific proposals. But the Stanford Synchrotron has very supportive of cultural heritage research. Right now, they're all COVID-19 research all the time. But you can submit, as we did, a peer-reviewed proposal. Same with the Syriac Galen pollen cyst. We submitted a proposal. We got the beam time. You get this multi-billion-dollar piece of kit for the logistical costs, really, and that's not insignificant as long as you make those data available.
I was wondering, Columba, if you had any thoughts about the future of collections. We're thinking of what gathering texts from different religious traditions in the Middle East, we might say. We might think of, well, the Chester Beatty Library in Dublin, which is an early way of gathering it. It's a very traditional way of buying the manuscripts, bringing them over to Europe and housing them. What do you think of, what will future archives look like?
Well, we're always going to have physical archives. I mean, obviously one of the urgent and poignant aspects of our work is that we are working in places, or we did work in places where the physical archive is no longer there. So it's either been completely destroyed, as happened in Mosul, or it's been moved and rendered inaccessible. So then the virtual becomes not just an easier way to access something, but it also becomes the only way. One of the things that's been interesting in our work is that when we've partnered with so many groups and institutions and locations and all these places, in every case, they've kept their manuscripts for many years. They've guarded them. They may no longer use them because they have printed versions of liturgical books and other things like that, but they've kept them because they do represent something precious to them. But in every instance, with the digitization training and work, when we go back, it's as if the owning community itself has a new appreciation for what they have. So things are tidier, they're better kept. They get interested in finding partnerships for real physical infrastructure, working with organizations that would fund a library renovation, further equipment, and so on. And we're in some cases able to make those introductions or support those partnerships so that they can, in a sense, tap once more into their own physical archive. And we're all aware that what we're living with now is the complementarity of the virtual and the physical material. And I'm someone who loves actual manuscripts. I spend a fair amount of time in the British Library when I'm in London, working with Syriac manuscripts. I have photographs of all of them, either ones that they took back in their microfilm days or ones that they now let us take when we sit in the reading room, which is a real blessing for Syriac work. But nothing replaces the actual encounter with the physical. So this continued complementarity of the two, and a point that we often make to our partners in the discussion stage, they're worried that once people look at the pictures, they won't want to come and see the manuscript. And we tell them it's the exact opposite, that when you work with the images, it's preparing you for the encounter. And then it can be a follow-up. So it can be propedeutic, or it can be a sort of reference for going back to. but nothing ever replaces the handling of the physical object, because we all know a manuscript in your hands yields up secrets that even the highest quality digital images will not. And that's the future, I think, of the work that we do.
Well, on that note, thank you very much. It's been a marvelous session and such great answers and great discussion. And we've already got real rave reviews on Twitter as well. So it's.
My pleasure.
I'm going to hand over to Henrika for an announcement.
Thank you.
So we'll start our next session in half an hour.